Liyana stood under the porch light with her small suitcase, trying to keep her smile steady. The courtyard was busy with music and cousins running around, and she wanted to feel excited for the celebration. A little kid tripped in the sand and she laughed, but the sound came out thin and unsure. She went to the wardrobe to take out the dress she loved, the one she saved for nights like this. When she opened the door, her heart dropped. The rail was empty. She thought she heard someone inside the house say it would be better this way, but she could not be sure. Her laugh stopped in her throat. On a small stool she found an old dress she never liked, one that always felt too tight and made her cheeks grow hot with embarrassment. For a moment she stood still, staring at it, hoping the real dress would appear. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. She picked up the old dress with slow fingers, smoothing it even though it would never sit right on her body. She breathed in, long and shaky, the way someone does when they refuse to cry where everyone can see them. Outside, she heard a cousin call her name, and music rise again from the yard. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and told herself she could get through one more night. Then she stepped toward the door, holding the dress close, wishing she could hold on to her pride with the same tight grip. Small humiliations began to pile up around Liyana in a way she could almost feel on her skin. They came quietly, the way unread letters collect in a corner until the stack grows heavy. Before every birthday gathering, every wedding, every funeral, something from her wardrobe went missing. Sometimes it was a bright scarf she loved. Other times it was a blouse she had folded neatly just the day before. She would open the closet and run her fingers along the hangers, hoping the fabric would appear, but all she found were empty spaces that made her chest tighten. When neighbors asked why she always seemed to lose things, she forced a small laugh and made a joke that did not feel like a joke. The laugh sounded short and too high, but it kept people from asking more questions. At night, she went up to the roof of the house where the city felt calm. The air there was cool on her face, and she held a pillow close so she could cry into it without anyone hearing. She tried to cry quietly, but sometimes her shoulders shook. She wished someone could understand how each missing piece of clothing felt like a tiny cut she could not show anyone. From downstairs, her husband Ibra would call up to her in a soft voice. He wanted to comfort her. She could hear that, but the words never came out strong enough. He would begin to defend her, then lose his courage halfway through, and his voice would fade into silence. Inside the house, Mama Fatu watched everything with a smile that looked warm from far away but felt sharp when she spoke. She would compliment Liyana on her sense of style, then add a small remark that made the compliment sting. She would say things like, "You look nice, but maybe next time try something simpler," or "This color suits you though it makes you stand out too much." Each sentence felt gentle at first, then cut beneath the surface. Liyana kept her head down and answered politely, because raising her voice never helped. After the third or fourth time something went missing, Liyana began to save money. She found an old tin box no one used anymore and hid it behind a loose tile near her bed. Every time she had a spare coin, she slipped it inside. The sound of each coin hitting the tin felt like a small promise. She told herself quietly that she would use this money one day, though she did not know for what yet. All she knew was that she needed something of her own, something no one else could take. The missing clothes kept disappearing at the worst moments. Once she planned for a cousin's wedding and even practiced how she would wear her hair. On the morning of the event, she opened her wardrobe only to find the new blouse she had bought gone again. Her hands shook as she touched the empty hanger. She told herself not to cry. She put on something older, something that did not fit well, and went out as if nothing had happened. She smiled through the entire event while her heart felt like it was shrinking inside her chest. Nights on the roof became her secret escape. She would watch the lights in the distance and imagine a different life. Sometimes she whispered to herself, almost like prayer, "One day this will change." One night she took the tin box out of its hiding place and counted the coins. She did not have much, but she felt steadier holding it in her hands. It reminded her that she still had control over at least one thing. Little by little, The quiet thefts built a wall around her. Not a real wall, but a space she could not step out of. She felt smaller in her own home, quieter in her own skin. Yet she kept saving coins. She kept surviving each small hurt. And though no one could see it, something inside her was starting to harden in a way that would one day protect her instead of break her. One warm afternoon, Liyana wandered through Tendari Market, letting the sounds and colors wash over her. She was tired from all the small hurts she had carried, but the market always felt alive in a way that lifted her spirits. As she walked past a stall, her eyes stopped on a bolt of fabric hanging in the sunlight. It was bright, bold, and full of energy, the kind of print she had admired for years but never had the courage to buy. She reached out and touched it, and something inside her loosened. A small laugh escaped her, light and surprised, and the vendor looked up with a big grin as if he already knew this fabric was meant for her. For the first time in a long while, Liyana did not worry about what anyone else would say. She bought it with the coins she had saved in her hidden tin. That night, she borrowed a sewing machine from a neighbor. The machine rattled and shook, but she did not mind. She spread the fabric out on the floor, feeling proud and nervous at the same time. As she cut and stitched, she hummed to herself. The sound kept her steady. By the time she finished, the moon was high and the house was quiet. When she held up the dress, her heart beat fast. She slipped it on and looked at herself in the mirror. For a moment, she just stared. She felt light, almost brave, as if she had stepped into a version of herself she had been waiting to meet. The next family event came quickly. Liyana dressed slowly, smoothing the new fabric over her hips and shoulders. She knew Mama Fatu would look for a dress to hide again. She had hidden something already. Liyana could feel it. But this time, Liyana did not panic. When Mama Fatu smirked and reached behind the wardrobe to pull out a garment she had tucked away, Liyana simply opened the door and walked out before the woman could finish her little performance. She let out a soft, unapologetic laugh and lifted her chin. Her homemade dress brushed against her knees as she stepped into the courtyard. The room seemed to pause. A cousin snickered first, not out of mockery but surprise. Then silence spread as everyone took in the sight of Liyana, walking with a confidence none of them had seen before. She felt something warm rise in her chest, like a quiet roar that made her stand even taller. For once she was not shrinking. For once she was not waiting to be embarrassed. People watched her, and she could almost hear their thoughts shift. They saw a woman who chose her own story, one stitch at a time, and would never again let a missing dress change the way she moved through the world. The months that followed moved like a soft, steady drumbeat. Every day someone knocked on Liyana's door asking if she could fix a torn sleeve, shorten a skirt, or make something new from old cloth. At first she worked on the floor of her room, but soon there were too many orders to fit in one small space. So she saved a little more, breathed in deep, and opened a tiny stall near Goma Bay. The air there always smelled of salt and fresh fish, and fishermen walking by would pause to watch her work. Children pressed their hands to the glass, their faces wide with curiosity as they pointed at the bright fabrics hanging inside. Liyana arranged her stall with care. She made a special shelf for customers who could not pay full price, because she remembered too clearly what it felt like to have nothing. She kept a small ledger under the counter and wrote small messages to herself in the margins, tiny reminders that she was growing, learning, and becoming braver than she ever thought she could be. Her laughter filled the stall most days, warm and easy. One afternoon, a bride tried on a skirt Liyana had altered, and she spun so fast in happiness that her veil nearly fell off. Liyana laughed so hard her eyes shone with tears. Another time, an old woman slapped her knee in delight at a blouse that fit her perfectly, and the sound made Liyana laugh until her stomach ached. Word began to spread beyond Goma Bay. People from neighboring villages traveled just to buy a dress from the young woman who could fit the soul. Some came because they were curious, some because they needed something special, and some simply wanted to see the girl everyone whispered about. Each new customer felt like a small victory. Meanwhile, Mama Fatu heard bits of news here and there. A colleague praised Liyana's work, and for a moment the color drained from her face. Later someone mentioned that Liyana's shop had a line outside on weekends, and again Mama Fatu froze before forcing a smile. Liyana kept counting coins into her tin, though now the tin filled much faster. Sometimes, while closing the stall at sunset, she burst into loud laughter that surprised even her. A neighbor passing by once asked if she had won a lottery. She shook her head, still laughing because she knew her victory was different. She had won the right to dress herself, the right to choose her life, and the deep, steady joy that grows when you finally breathe in your own worth. The video appeared online late one night, filmed on someone's old phone during a family dinner. The clip was shaky, but clear enough to show Mama Fatu opening a closet, pulling out one of Liyana's dresses, and hiding it behind her back with a small smile. Then it showed Liyana standing there, confused for a moment, before pretending nothing was wrong and choosing something else to wear. The video was short, only a few seconds, but it spread across phones with surprising speed, traveling from screen to screen like water slipping through cracks. People watched it and felt a sharp mix of emotions. Some were angry at how calmly Mama Fatu did it. Some felt deep sympathy for Liyana. Others became curious and looked up her name, only to find her small shop near Goma Bay. Within hours, Liyana's messages filled with orders, kind words, and questions from strangers who felt connected to her story. A teacher from another village wrote that she wanted a dress that carried the same freedom Liyana showed. A young girl sent a voice note saying she hoped to be brave like her one day. A local reporter reached out, asking if he could visit her shop and share her journey with the whole district. Liyana stared at all the notifications in disbelief. She felt both overwhelmed and strangely calm, as if the world had suddenly put a spotlight on a part of her she kept hidden for years. Meanwhile, in the same house, Mama Fatu sat scrolling through her own phone, watching the video again and again. The bright screen lit up her face, and her expression shifted from surprise to confusion to something close to regret. She read the comments, the outrage, the support for Liyana, and her fingers tightened around the phone. She had never imagined anyone outside the family would see her actions so clearly. Liyana tried to laugh it off at first. She joked about how strange the internet could be and how funny it was that people cared so much about a missing dress. But later, when she opened a parcel from Keto Island and found colorful sewing thread inside, along with a handwritten note that said simply, "Keep going," her eyes filled with tears. She held the thread close, feeling the kindness of a stranger reach across the sea and land softly in her hands. The house felt different after the video. Some relatives avoided eye contact. Some whispered. Some watched Liyana with new respect. Doors that once felt closed began to open a little, while others closed tight. And in the middle of it all, Liyana kept working, kept sewing, kept choosing herself, realizing that a single video had not changed her life but had helped the world finally see the strength she had been stitching together for years. The afternoon heat pressed down on Goma Bay, thick and heavy, when Mama Fatu marched toward Liyana's stall. Her hands were planted on her hips, her chin lifted, and her steps sharp enough to cut the air. Liyana noticed her from the corner of her eye and felt her stomach twist, but she kept stitching, hoping the moment would pass. It didn't. Mama Fatu stopped right at the entrance and began to speak loudly, her words hard and sharp. She accused Liyana of trying to embarrass the family. She said the viral video was her fault, that she had turned people against their home, that she was making dresses only to gain pity and attention. Every sentence felt like a stone thrown across the small stall. The market shifted instantly. Traders nearby paused their work. Customers froze with half-folded fabrics in their hands. A hush spread across the stalls, the kind that falls before something important happens. Liyana felt her heart beating fast, so fast it almost hurt, but she made herself breathe slowly. She stood up, wiped her hands on her skirt, and faced Mama Fatu with steady eyes. She didn't shout. She didn't defend herself with anger. Instead, she spoke in a calm voice about the nights she had sat alone on the porch, saving tiny coins in a tin because she had no other power. She told the crowd how many times she had found her clothes missing and had forced herself to smile anyway. Her voice was soft but clear, and it carried the weight of years no one else had seen. People shifted closer, listening. Some nodded quietly, finally understanding what had been happening all along. Others looked uneasy, unsure where to place their loyalties. The whole market seemed to breathe with her words. Then, from somewhere behind the crowd, a little child shouted a silly joke, something about buttons running away from a shirt. It was so unexpected that a few people snorted, then chuckled, then burst into full laughter. The tension cracked open, and the laughter rolled through the market like a fresh breeze. Even Liyana laughed, her shoulders loosening as if a heavy knot inside her had snapped free. Mama Fatu's face changed. Her mouth tightened, then softened, then tightened again. She looked less like a villain and more like someone who suddenly saw herself from the outside. It wasn't an apology, not yet, but something in her expression broke just a little. A small fissure, and though the crowd could not see it clearly, Liyana did. She knew cracks like that widen over time. Change did not arrive like a bright sunrise. It came slowly, unevenly, with days that felt hopeful and others that dragged like heavy cloth across a dusty floor. After the scene at the market, Mama Fatu did not suddenly become kind or soft. Instead, her defenses rose and fell like waves. One morning she arrived stiff and silent, avoiding everyone's eyes. The next day she brought Liyana an awkward compliment, something like, "Your stitching is neat enough," spoken so quietly it almost disappeared. Liyana didn't trust it at first. She thanked her politely and kept working. A week later Mama Fatu brought an apple, set it on the counter without a word, then hurried away before anyone could ask why. Another day, when Liyana was drowning in orders before a festival, Mama Fatu stood in the doorway for a long moment, clutching her shawl like she wasn't sure she belonged there. Then she stepped inside and offered her hands to help. Her stitches were shaky, but her effort was real. Liyana accepted these moments with caution. She opened the door to forgiveness just a little, the same way she opened a seam to check if the fabric could handle another stitch. Slowly she mapped out Mama Fatu's attempts the way she mapped hems. Gently, patiently, waiting to see where the cloth would stretch and where it would resist. There were nights when old resentment rose up without warning. Something small would be said, a comment too sharp or a memory too heavy, and the anger spilled out like water from a cracked pot. But there were also mornings when Liyana found Mama Fatu sitting quietly by the window, mending a torn sleeve with trembling hands that steadied after a few moments. In those minutes the old woman looked softer, almost like she wished she could erase the past with every careful stitch. The workshop itself grew in ways that made Liyana's heart feel full. She hired girls who once worked in other households carrying water, sweeping floors, or running errands that never earned them anything except tired feet. Now they stood at measuring tables with bright eyes and busy hands. Liyana taught them how to cut fabric, how to measure twice before sewing once, how to look a customer in the eye and ask for fair payment. The girls learned quickly, and their laughter filled the room like sunlight. When they all worked together, the sound reminded Liyana of wind pushing new sails across an open sea. It was the sound of young women learning they deserved more than what the world told them. Little by little, the neighborhood around them began to change too. Children who used to tease Liyana by mimicking her hunched walk now watched her stride through the street with her head high. Soon they copied that instead, spinning in pretend dresses and calling her Auntie Taylor with pride. Shopkeepers who once greeted Mama Fatu first now greeted Liyana, holding doors for her customers and asking about new designs she was working on. People spoke her name with respect, not pity. Some even asked her for advice when starting small businesses of their own. Even so, change was never simple. Some days Mama Fatu snapped back into her old habits, giving sharp comments that made everyone go quiet. Other days she showed up early with breakfast and asked shyly if she could help cut patterns. Liyana learned to take it step by step. Forgiveness, she realized, was like sewing. You couldn't rush it or the seams would break. Still, the progress was real. Some days slow, some days bright, all of them moving in one direction. And as the workshop filled with laughter and the neighborhood shifted around her in small but steady ways, Liyana felt something she hadn't felt in years. The sense that she was building not just dresses, but a new life, one stitch at a time. Years later in Ngalawa, Liyana stood under the painted awning of her bigger shop, the morning sun warming the colors above her head. She slipped her fingers into the pocket of the dress she had sewn earlier that day, feeling the smooth fabric and the quiet pride that came with it. People moved in and out of the shop, calling her name with easy warmth. Men, women, and elders waved as they passed, greeting her the way you greet someone who has earned her place with steady work and an open heart. Their smiles made the air feel lighter. At the gate, Mama Fatu waited. She didn't hide behind walls anymore. She watched the steady line of customers who trusted Liyana, the way they nodded at her as if she were a pillar in the community. For a long moment she simply stood there, hands folded, eyes soft with feelings she could not quite name. Liyana noticed her but didn't rush. She laughed at something a child said, a full, round laugh that rose out of her like a song. The sound surprised her with its joy, and a small tear slipped out when an old customer she had helped years ago ran up and hugged her with both arms. Liyana walked through the gate without any drama, her steps calm and sure. This time Mama Fatu didn't wait for her to come all the way. She moved forward too, meeting her halfway, her voice gentle in a way Liyana had almost forgotten was possible. There was regret in her tone, but also pride, careful and new, like something still learning to stand. Liyana smiled, a bright lift that lit her whole face. Her eyes shone, not from sadness but from how far she had come. She breathed in slowly, steady and certain. She knew now that she was wearing a kind of confidence she could never touch before, a confidence stitched from her own courage. And even the person who once hid her clothes could no longer find a way to undo it.